Okay, our first speaker will be Ed Loewenstein at Auburn University. And the title of this talk, a lead-in talk to discuss the group in general, is the value of recurring interdisciplinary meetings for preventing stagnation in natural resources education, or why should I attend the silviculture instructors tour? Take it away, Ed.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, so let me start by nodding to my co-authors. I'm not sure what it says that I'm the only author on this presentation that's not yet retired. I think it just means that I'm jealous. But for the most part, this presentation is going to be preaching to the choir. You're already here because you want to be. What I hope to do is convince all of us that we need to recruit every silviculturist that does not attend this meeting regularly, especially those that are in the early stages of their career, not just because it's good for them, but because it's vital to our discipline. So the title of this presentation talks about intradisciplinary meetings, but everybody's doing interdisciplinary research these days. Why? The cynic in me says it's due to this third bullet. However, at its best, interdisciplinary work brings together scientists from multiple disciplines, each with a unique perspective to the problem. If the project's well crafted and the personnel mesh, a wonderful synergy is realized, right? It leads to our thinking outside the box. Outside the box. What box? Our respective disciplinary boxes? I'd suggest that the problem is a little bit more insidious than that. Interdisciplinary research helps us to think outside the box. But when did we climb into this box? We went to university to broaden our horizons, expand our perspectives, and open our minds. And yet, most of the forces in academia work to develop highly specialized individuals. Training comes primarily from a single person, our dissertation advisor. Detailed field study of various forest types is often limited to where we trained or where we currently work. And even worse, sometimes both are in the same region. Within our discipline, we specialize, carving out a niche so that we're more competitive for grants and publication. And with each rung we climb on the career ladder, we tend to close ourselves more securely within our box. And I think the best way that I can think of to put this is from one of my favorite fictional characters, Harry Sheldon, written by Isaac Asimov in the Foundation series. A quote from him is, over-specialization is a terrible thing. It cuts knowledge at 1,000 points and leaves it bleeding. Add to this generic institutional pressure towards specialization, and then we tend to have few opportunities that allow most of us to expand our perspectives. Time pressures and the huge amount of material that gets published within our discipline makes it darn near impossible to follow a broad array of the literature. But we know most of what's going on within our own focus area. Same thing happens at conferences. We gravitate towards what we know or what we need to know so that we don't fall behind in our narrow expertise, both in the selection of conferences themselves and in the choice of papers once we arrive at the conference. But worse yet is what I'll call the Baskin-Robbins syndrome. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Baskin-Robbins 31 flavors. It's an ice cream shop. That's what happens, at least in my experience, within our natural resources colleges and schools, within forestry programs. In most of our departments, few have the luxury of hiring multiple faculty members within a single discipline. So there's rarely anyone close at hand to challenge our perspective. There's little opportunity to hone our arguments with somebody else that is familiar with a similar perspective. There's no cross-pollination within our discipline, no obligate outcrossing, if you will. Students are sent to see the ecologist or the economist, the hydrologist or the physiologist. Who they talk to depends on the question that they ask. As the subject matter expert, we teach the only course within our discipline that our undergraduate students will be exposed to during their program. We spend all of our time looking through a microscope, but then we're expected to describe the entire landscape of our discipline to our students. So are we generalist or specialist? I guess the appropriate answer is yes. There is and probably should be a bit of schizophrenia within each of us. But going back to my original point, which of these do we hone? There's our problem. The academic pressures are towards specialization, but in order to teach the broad scope of our discipline and often to bring our discipline's unique perspective to interdisciplinary research, we have to become generalists. How? We need to think outside the box, but within our box. Regular intradisciplinary meetings and discussions are how we do this. And this group is a great example of this, and one that has personally benefited me to no end. We get together annually, typically before the SAF meeting at the convention, and in normal years, the local silviculturists host the tour, and they get to highlight the local silvicultural practices that are common in that region. We all get a chance to see and discuss silvicultural operations and forest types that we may never see within our home region. And more importantly, is the knowledge that gets passed on generationally. Here's a picture from the 2000 tour and brings up another favorite quote of mine. If I can see further, it is because I stand on the shoulders of the giants that have come before me. We see here Ted Daniel and David Smith, who have graciously shared their knowledge with the next generation. And if you take a look at this picture, many of the folks that are in it are attending today. A little bit older, hopefully a little bit wiser, but the torch gets passed from generation to generation. Therein lies the value, or one of the great values of this group. And so we get to see various site preparation methods. Here's a picture of site prep in Alberta, Canada. The biggest problem they had with obtaining sufficient natural regen was the large amount of organic matter that was present on the site. And so extreme measures were required for site scarification. I had never seen what was called anchor chain dragging outside of a textbook. And quite frankly, I was not prepared at the scale that this goes on. You can see here these bullets that are being pulled behind a bulldozer, and there were 9 of them. Each one of these things is almost the size of an SUV. When we were in Pennsylvania, the problem was deer browse. And so in order for them to get any hardwood regeneration at all, they had to erect exclusion fences. Prescribed burning is really common in most regions, or many regions. But I personally had never seen a drip torch so large as to require a helicopter. This thing had a 55-gallon fuel tank on it. Truly amazing. Here's an example that I had never seen before, even in textbooks. This is double bedding, and we often use our colleagues for scale. Some of you may remember Kurt Gottschalk, well over 6 feet tall. These double beds were greater than 3 feet tall. Speaking of scale, here's one of our moderators for today and a co-author of this presentation. I don't know how many board feet are in Brian doing the big fig Newton, but I'll let you guys give a guess. Here's an example of root raking. I don't know how common this is outside of the Southeast. And fortunately, because of the amount of erosion that sometimes occurs. It is becoming less common even in the southeastern US. Windrowing, broadcast fire. Again, these may be common practices for many of us, but others may never see this in their home regions. During the 2009 tour, we got a chance to see alternate forest products being produced. This gentleman is baling slash pine straw for sale in the local landscaping market. And the pine straw is much more valuable than the timber that surrounds him that is producing it. And I have absolutely no idea if a landowner can make additional income from selling whatever it is that Klaus is doing to this tree. But I think this begs for a caption contest. So if you would come up with a caption for this photo and put it into the chat function of Zoom, I'd like to put those together and come up with a winner. We also get a chance to see various forest types and look at things like density management or lack thereof. Here's an overly dense stand of southern pine in dire need of thinning. During the 2007 tour here above Lake Tahoe, we got to look at restoration following wildfire. Here's an oak shelter wood. And the 2005 tour in Louisiana, a bald cypress stand. Here's a selection thinner. Another shelter wood, but this one in the western conifers, very different from the oak shelter wood that we saw out east. Here's a natural longleaf pine stand with a wiregrass understory. This forest structure is maintained by periodic prescribed fire. Similarly, this is an oak savanna, also maintained by regular prescribed fire. Here in the 2018 tour in Oregon, we got a chance to see production forestry in Douglas fir. And here's some natural ponderosa pine in the Black Hills, I believe from the 2001 tour. And spruce aspen mixture in Canada. And of course, we get to discuss all of the research that's associated with many of these stands in each region. The problems each of us are trying to address get brought up, our successes, our failures, and the synergy that all of these silviculturists that attend these meetings is able to bring to this comes up with some fairly unique discussion and oftentimes some solutions that the local silviculturists may never have come up with on their own. And there's, excuse me. These meetings allow each of us to break out of our respective boxes as specialists. Our students vicariously obtain much broader perspective of our discipline, and we develop an extended network of colleagues and friends. These folks collaborate and help with teaching and research problems. More importantly, as a group, we are able to take control of our discipline because there is a forum for discussion of ideas and policy relating to our field. But maybe most importantly is that opportunity to develop mentoring relationships with the young faculty in our field. And we get to play a little bit. Here's the canopy crane at Wind River. These meetings allow us to see the forest for the trees. We get to see our discipline at a landscape scale as opposed to a stand scale. And that's pretty much what I've got. So Brian and or Jim, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Boy, that brought back a lot of memories. Anybody have any discussion? Anything to say?
Yeah, I would change Ed's first comment and would say, if you are a true specialist, you must be a generalist from a silvicultural standpoint. I don't think you could even be a specialist if you didn't have the oversight of the many years that we've seen all over the United States and parts of Canada. So Um, these tours have been probably the most beneficial thing that I've ever done as a professional forester. So anyway, thank you.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. To follow up with Dave's comment, I do some substitute teaching at some local high schools here, and I try to, inspire the students a little bit by telling them, I grew up on a turkey farm, but this tour has taken me from Alaska to Hawaii to Canada to Maine to Florida, all over. And it's just been incredible the amount of pictures that you accumulate and can use in the classroom, all these different silviculture types. Anybody else? I guess since we're not in the woods, we can't argue about terms and things like that.
Well, I mean, it's kind of just reiterating the obvious, basically. I mean, after teaching for 30 years, the amount of things that you can add on new continuously in your classes has been invaluable. And plus, there's just such a range that you can cover and talk about it from a kind of a halfway knowledgeable perspective, other than just kind of guessing what's going on in other regions or with other species types. So yeah, I mean, this is probably the best group for that opportunity that there is.
Go ahead, Kristen.
I was just going to say that the community is also fantastic. So you learn new things, of course, but then it's also, if you're stuck with something in teaching or you're struggling, like we all struggle sometimes with certain classes and density management or different topics, and bouncing research ideas off of each other. It's just a nice community, and it's something to look forward to every year, where you're always welcomed.
And to follow up on Kristen's comments, was when she hosted the tour last time, and I think Northern Arizona has hosted 3 of these in my time, was this tablet marking exercise. And it really took me a while to get a hold of what was going on, but just the innovation that comes out of this meeting, especially with the new technology, some of the new things that are being proposed, the idea that loggers can now do some of the cutting without painting the trees, and using tablets to try and figure out which patches to cut. It just blows me away, some of the new technology and new ideas that are coming out in the last few years.
I looked at the Ed's challenge for people to come up with a caption for that picture of Klaus and the big tree. I like Tom's Bob's, that Jim Goulden, sorry, I'll get it right, that his tongue was stuck to the tree.
And for those who don't know, that's I believe a sugar pine, and one of the ways to tell a sugar pine is by the vanilla smell that you have to get real close to. I had several other people kissing that tree or some other trees during that tour. I may have to use those pictures down the road for something.
You shouldn't actually laugh at that, because in Maine, there was for many, many decades, there was quite a market in spruce gum. And of course, it was mostly picked off of the tree with your hands, but I suppose if you got too close to it and started to lick it, that actually could happen. So that market's gone. LL Bean stopped selling it about 15 years ago in the store, and that was it.
Brian alluded to the fact, well, I mean, we've said that the in-person silviculture instructors tour, and they go back to, it was started by Claire Merritt in the 1960s. It's organized and hosted by one or more of the silviculture professors that are sort of closest to the convention site, and a number. I'll try to give them a shout out as we go through this, but a number of the tour leaders today, virtual tour leaders today, have in fact organized tours. Kristen being one of them, Bob Seymour, and others. So we'll try to, I'll we'll try to point those out as we go through this.